Welcome to Brand on the Rocks, the podcast that distills bold ideas into clear messages you can actually use. Each week, we serve up conversations, audits, and straight pours of insight to help you cut through the noise and grow your business. Hosted by brand strategist Ryan Holck, this is where clarity comes neat and your brand gets remembered. Hey, welcome back to Brand on the Rocks and another episode. This is a shared pour episode where we are connecting with other business leaders, entrepreneurs, and talking about what is and isn't working in marketing, in business, ways that we're connecting. And if you have been watching for a little while, a few episodes back, Adam and I had a great conversation. And after we stopped recording, the conversation kind of kept going. And so we actually decided we'd record two of these. So if you're watching the video, you're going to be like, hey, they have different colored shirts, but nothing else has changed. So anyways, so Adam, for those of you who don't know you, take a moment, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, my name's Adam McLaughlin. I am Ryan's co-host who doesn't always show up for work. So I'm a recovering Canadian and started my agency in 2011. And I've been traveling full time with my wife and three boys since 2018 and recently went through a rebrand. So I'm excited to talk with Ryan, talk with you, Ryan. Sorry, talk about you in the third person. I'm talking to the listener. I'm, obviously quite a casual guy, and hopefully that resonates through the work that I do with clients in the digital marketing space.
So for those of you who are listening, Adam and I have known each other for a number of years, and we joked in the last episode that the first time we actually met face to face, we were like 40 minutes into a conversation before we were like, hey, we've never actually shaken hands or anything. This has always been digital. So the world is a cool place in terms of the ability to connect with people internationally. Adam is not even in the US right now. So he's, you're Australia right now, right?
Yeah, I'm in Australia.
So, but the ability then to kind of even talk about marketing and what he's seeing in his travels around the world.
Yeah.
So we talked in the last episode, kind of about the elevator pitches and how do you get into your conversation. And I think that was a great conversation where eye-opening for me for some creative things. But one of the things that you're doing is helping people with some of their content marketing and stuff like that. It's an angle that I don't do.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the heart of that and why you just did a rebrand and kind of where you're going.
Yeah. So my agency is the Trust Marketing Agency. And I've realized that it's not like, it just shows you how slow I can be, how thick I can be, because I've realized how important trust is. Welcome to 2025. Yeah. And, everybody else knew in 2004, but I'm working on this. Okay. And what I realized is that consistency is actually what builds trust. So I'm going to take you backwards on a ladder here for a minute. Okay. So trust is the thing that makes people want to purchase from you. Nobody buys a tube of toothpaste that they don't trust the packaging. If the packaging has a hole, you don't buy that toothpaste. Nobody goes to a barber they don't trust. Nobody eats at a restaurant if they walk in and they don't trust the restaurant, right? And for sure, nobody is referring that to a friend. Nobody's saying, hey, go try this restaurant that I don't trust, right? Or go try this restaurant. About 3 times out of 5, they'll give you a really great meal. It just doesn't happen, right? So trust is essential for you to want to do business and for you to want to tell somebody to do business or to create a referral. Okay, so a step back from trust is how do we create trust then, since it's so important? And a step back from that is to create consistency, because consistency builds trust. It's the fact that, whether you're working out and your body knows, oh, I need to be putting on muscle because this has consistently been necessary for me. Or whether you're showing up every morning at 9 o'clock at the office, that's consistency. People can bank on that. Or whether you're always 5 minutes early for a video call, this consistency. People trust you because of your consistency, to the point where if you say you're going to be on that video call, they know you're going to be on that video call, even if you have to walk through a hurricane to get there, because your consistency has built that trust. right? So then, okay, the question is, well, then how do we create consistency? So how do we create consistency for our clients, right? So they, you know, answer the phone one way, but the social media post is all about,
Ooh.
how cheap we are. We're the best price in town. But the email that we sent out was pay a little more, get a little better quality. Okay, well, how do we create consistency, right? Because whoever is
Mhm.
posting on social media is not creating the same messaging as whoever was posting on email. So backup from consistency is clarity. So once we get clarity, once we really figure out who we are and how we want to be known as a brand and as an
Mhm.
organization, then we can be clear to create consistent messaging, and creating consistent messaging and consistent interactions with our clients will create trust, and creating trust is what leads to somebody making a purchase, doing business with us, and then referring a friend. And so it really all starts with clarity. And if we want to go one step before that, it starts with communication, because until we have a conversation, we're not going to be able to create clarity. So we need to start this whole process with having a conversation. So, all that to
Mm.
say, I create consistency that creates trust. And the consistency is how clients interact with your business, whereas your focus, Ryan, is the messaging that you're using to
Mhm.
create that consistency. And both pieces are important, right? Because if the messaging is on point,
Right.
but social media is off, and you're the friendliest people in town, this is what all your social media says, but when I show up at the door to your restaurant, you don't even bother greeting me. Okay, so Adam's world
Mm.
is client interactions, all of those touch points, and how do we drive consistency there? And your world, Ryan, is the messaging, to be
Right.
sure that we are clear in the words we're using to create that consistency.
Are you tired of feeling stuck and uncertain about your next business move? The Thing Orlando is the perfect place to break through those barriers, find a community of supportive entrepreneurs, and get actionable insights to grow. I'll be there again this year sharing what I know, and you can grab your spot with a discount. Use code I'm with Ryan at registration. That's thethingorlando.com, and I'll see you there. So in some ways, you're helping build or at least shape culture, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Would that be accurate?
Yeah.
So this is who we say we are, and is every piece of the puzzle in congruence? Is it consistent with that? Because
Yeah, because a lot of times we go into work with a client and they say, oh, yeah, no, we are like the fastest plumber in town. Oh, well, it's great that they have that messaging. Okay. And they say, like, yeah, so, if somebody calls us, we're there in like 20 minutes. Okay. Well, you can't be the fastest plumber in town and be there in 20 minutes and also be the cheapest plumber in town.
Mhm.
Because in order to be there in 20 minutes whenever somebody calls, you have to staff people that are waiting around for those emergency calls. Okay. So you can't be the cheapest and the fastest.
Right.
We got to
Right.
choose one of these things, right? But clients will, it's like, so I'm the fastest plumber in town. Somebody calls, we're there in 20 minutes. And it's like, okay, that is really great. I'm glad you have that clarity. But how fast do you respond to emails? Do you pick up the phone after one ring? How soon do you send out the invoice when you're finished? How quickly how fast are all of
Mhm.
those processes? How fast do you pay your contractors? Well, they allow us 30 days, so we pay 30 days. Okay, well, you're not really the fastest plumber in town, because the guy across the road will pay them in 12 days. Right? So it's
Right.
like, okay, well, oftentimes we think of a client interaction as
Mm.
being the only thing that matters. And I think there are a lot of touch points that we don't anticipate. Like, how
Wow.
fast do you greet somebody when they walk in the door of your showroom? Right? Because that could create the idea that you're the fastest plumber in town. Or your radio ad is like, hey, we are the fastest plumber in town. Call us and we'll be at your house in 20 minutes. Or your radio ad is, we're the fastest plumber in town. We'll be at your house in 20 minutes. Enjoy some silence. We had 30 seconds we didn't need because we're on a call. And then there's 15 seconds of silence on your radio ad. Like, that's a touch point. Sorry, these dogs. That's a touch point that you could drive home. We're the fastest in town. So it's not about like, we just answered the phone and we got to your house fast, which is important in a leak. But what about your radio ads? What about your emails? What about your front door? What about your welcome mat? You know, could you find a kind of a kitschy something on Amazon that's like something about, you know, ring the door, we'll be here faster than it, you know, whatever. So what are all of the things people experience? And often people think about, okay, so often people make two mistakes. One, they think that there's only 5 or 6 touch points that a client experiences. And the reality is your client probably experiences 40 to 50 touch points with your business before they do business with you. So how can we drive that consistency through all of those touch points, not leaving anything to chance?
Yep.
And the second thing is imagining that internal culture, as we're looping back finally to your question, internal culture doesn't affect clients. And that is completely wrong. Because, you know, Andy Stanley, no, I don't know who it was. I don't know misrepresent now that I just said a name out loud. But somebody said, however you treat your employees will filter down to your customers. Yes. And so if somebody says to, let's use the fastest plumber example again, shows up to somebody's house, fixes the toilet, everything's good, the client's happy, and the customer says, hey, you really are the fastest plumbers in town. And he goes, well, yeah, until it comes to getting paid. There is an element of consistency that has just eroded trust. So you mean tomorrow, when they follow up with me and ask me to pay the invoice so quickly that they want me to pay the next day, but they're not paying their employees for 30 days or whatever the case might be, right? So there's 2 factors. One, there's way more touch points that a client experiences than you would initially imagine as your gut instinct. 2, your internal culture will translate down to your clients. So if you are creating an internal culture that represents your brand, then your employees and your team and your leadership of your other departments feel empowered to pass that on to your clients, which again creates brand consistency. And all of this is before we've even talked about the words you use in your messaging.
Right. Because the words you use are going to reinforce or destroy that piece. They're either going to come alongside and say, yes, you're right, all of those things are true, or maybe they're not.
Right.
And messaging isn't just, you just alluded to it so well, isn't just the words you use. Sometimes it's the hesitancy or the question mark that you end things with that makes the person on the other end go, they're not telling me something. There is a gap here. And in that way, that's really, for me, the challenge of marketing sometimes is I can help you get the words right. I can't help you necessarily, or at least most people don't think they need help on fixing the culture and dynamics of what's happening on the team that may be impacting the marketing and the messaging.
Yeah. And so, you know, if we were to break it down, I'm kind of the actions guy and you're kind of the words guy. And not to brag, but actions speak louder than words. So all I'm saying is that there is, yes, getting clear affects your culture. And in some ways, you get let's go back to the fastest plumber in town analogy, because I don't know the fastest plumber in town, and it seems to be helpful to be kind of separated from that idea. But if you get a plumber who is an absolute perfectionist and is not the fastest, then that person will self-select from your culture because you're so clear about your culture. Now, it's possible that person goes back. So the rush guy comes in, he fixes the leaking toilet, and he escapes. And an hour later, the perfectionist comes in and double checks the work, right? Because the client isn't urgent about the perfectionist. The client is urgent about stop my toilet from leaking.
Right.
In that sense. But so creating the culture where you're clear might allow the perfectionist to say, I can't be in the 911 emergency plumber slot, but I could do the follow quality assurance, right? I could go, I could make sure everything's cleaned up. I could double check the work. I could just check everything's finger tightened, so that getting clear on your culture can help you figure out who is the best for each of those positions, right? Because if you make a claim that we're the fastest plumber in town and the perfectionist plumber goes out and takes an hour and a half to fix the toilet, but the neighbor had a problem and the fast plumber went out and fixed the toilet like to the point where it wasn't leaking, but maybe not everything was quite all the way tight, or maybe there was a little bit of, mud from their shoe left over, but it was 90%, but they got it done in 20 minutes. Now, again, you're compromising the brand of we're the fastest plumber in town. Because when those two neighbors talk, one guy goes, oh yeah, fastest plumber in town, in and out 20 minutes. The other guy's like, this guy took 90 minutes. He made me late for the movie I was supposed to catch. Right.
So you're bringing to mind, actually, we have been fighting a challenge with a vehicle and vehicle warranty issue for going on 10 months. And we picked up our car this last week. We didn't even make it home before the car had issues again. So there's some trust erosion that has happened there. And what I'm finding in the process is that it is largely dependent on who is helping you, because it isn't that the training and ability is not present. It's that it's not consistent. And so today I spoke to an action taker. I'll just put it, that's the best way to say it. Like, we're on the phone. This is what we will do. We will take care of this. Here's my next steps. And within 5 or 10 minutes, I had a phone call from the promised person that said, here's what we're going to do, confirming the information I was given. I've got X number of things to anticipate before you. You should see me around this time. Half hour, 40 minutes before, here's a text message. Hey, this is just me. Here's a follow-up. Like, here's, like, all of a sudden, like, one group is building trust and one group is eroding it. And it's interesting to see, because this process has drawn out for so long for us, to see over and over, like, where you go and visit in person and you go, that person is not part of the solution group. These people over in this office are part of the solution group. And it's fascinating that I would almost bet money that if I walked in and said, well, their purpose statement says they are in the business of helping solve problems, I'm like, no, you're not. Well, half of them are, but half of them aren't. And it's that little bit of inconsistency that has taken us from, we would buy another one of your cars, to, there's no way I'm spending $20,000 in your dealership ever again.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to me that you say there are so many pieces to this, because I think you're right. And some of it then comes down to, as the leader, as the organization of the business, of the team.
Yeah.
Like, what are some things that you could do to help build trust, not just with the people outside, but amongst your team so that you can solve some of that problem.
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing to realize is that every decision we make is based on our values. So what your listener is wearing today, what they ate for breakfast, did they skip breakfast? Did they have coffee? Did they skip coffee? What will they do with their spare time this evening? How do they commute to and from work? Do they work from home? All of these decisions that we make are based on our values, right? Like, do I enroll my kid in soccer, or do I spend that money going to the movies every Tuesday night with my kid instead of soccer? Like, all of these things are based on values. What did I eat? How did I eat? When did I eat? How much did I eat? Did I exercise today? How did I exercise? Everything's based on every decision is based on values. And so what that helps you realize is that your team is making decisions based on values. Now, if you're not clear about your organization values, they're making decisions based on their own values. And for some people, they value great customer service and problem solving. But other people might value, I do as little work as I can in order to get home on time. Or I'm not staying after hours. I value sitting on my couch and, relaxing after a hard day of work. Or I value doing as little as necessary to not get fired, right? And so they're making decisions based on those values. We don't just make decisions out of thin air, right? So now if you are clear about your organization's values, you empower your team to make decisions through those values. And if we're all making decisions through our, 3, 4, 5 core values, then we can all at least have a conversation about how we make decisions consistently. So let's say your number one core value is problem solving. And you define problem solving. So this is another piece of the pie, is getting clear on how are you going to define that? Because one person's way of problem solving is different than somebody else's way of problem solving. So what does problem solving look like? It looks like explain the next action to the customer, do the next action, confirm the action's complete. Okay, that is problem solving. So what are we going to do? We're going to explain the problem to Ryan. We're going to explain our next step. We're going to do the next step. We're going to confirm the next step is completed with Ryan. Okay, so now the whole team is on that same page. This is the value. This is how we make decision. This is how we problem solve. And that is our core value. Great. If somebody's not doing that, you have a conversation now to say, hey, how come you're not solving problems? That's our core value. And they say, well, you get to have a conversation. Up until then, the conversation was like, hey, how come you haven't called Ryan back? And they're like, well, I'm trying to do what's right. I'm trying to do some homework. I'm trying to look into all the different options. Maybe behind the scenes, they're looking into all the different options. But for you as the customer, it looks like they're not returning my call. Right. In a charitable sense, maybe there's other things going on. But for the employer to then say, well, you're solving problems by giving Ryan a solution, following up on the solution, and giving a result. But this other guy's solving problems by doing 3 weeks of homework, right? Because each of your employees, if they're not given your core values, are going to make decisions based on their own values, right? Well, I'll do that tomorrow because it's 4:55 and I don't have time to do 10 minutes of work now. That's different than our core value is we make a promise, we get it done today, right? Or however we phrase those values.
Right.
So as an employer, if you think that all of these decisions are just happening out in the ether, like a shotgun approach to people just making random decisions, and sometimes Larry makes great decisions and sometimes Larry makes terrible decisions, and we can never figure out what decision we're getting from Larry today. The reason is because we make all of our decisions, every decision is based on values. And if you can clearly tell, if you want to work here, this is what our organization values, we can make decisions through those filters. But if you're not going to give people clear values, or you're going to give them 12 core values they're never going to remember, then they're just going to make decisions based on their own personal values. Not that they're wrong, but they could be different than what best aligns with your organization. And that creates inconsistency.
I see that in businesses we're doing business with. I see it in brands, organizations I've worked. Totally and completely see that. So I know that one of the things that you do is try and provide a way for business leaders to articulate and get out into the world those core values, those things they believe in. Those. Tell me a little bit about you. You've kind of walked through some of the philosophy here, which is at its core where you've got to start. But practically, for those people who are like, okay, like how it's one thing to document it, it's another thing to share it.
Right.
How are you helping organizations share that kind of info with their clients, with their teams, with?
Yeah, we just invite all their customers to the weekly staff meeting.
That sounds like such a nonprofit approach. Okay.
Which obviously is a ridiculous idea. But some people say, no, we have these core values and we talk about them every staff meeting. I don't get why my customers don't understand them.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you're missing the disconnect. And the disconnect is the interaction that your team has with the customers. That's the bridge. That's the middle ground, right? You're saying we value these things in our staff meeting and customers are experiencing something completely different. So the fun thing is that consistency happens all the time, whether we like it or not. And that idea often gets pushed back because they go, no, this feels like inconsistency. Well, and here's a little bit of a brain twist, bit of a tongue twister. Inconsistency is actually consistently experiencing different things. Inconsistency is because I went to one employee and got this result, and I went to another employee and got that result. I consistently have different experiences with your business. That's what we call inconsistency, and that's what erodes trust. So consistency is happening. So you get to either guide the consistency, so all of your team gets to make decisions that are in line with your values. So your customer, whether they deal with your Monday morning shift or whether they deal with your Friday evening shift, gets a consistent experience.
So how are you helping? Yes.
Yeah.
How are you helping brands then who think they're consistent? They're like, we're doing good. I think we're there.
Yeah.
Go. There's a gap.
Yeah.
Here's what you need to do to fill it.
Right. So there's some litmus tests. So what we do is we will start with the leadership team. So let's say it's a CEO and 5 VPs as an example. Okay. We give them all a survey where we ask 5 extremely simple questions. And then we talk about all the conflicting stories that come from those 5 questions. And sometimes not in a conflicting way, like we're trying to create conflict, but that's the only way to figure out clarity is to figure out where the story doesn't match and then have a conversation. So sometimes we think that clarity creates conflict, right? Like, oh, I thought this. No, I thought this. No, you said this, so I thought this. And really, that's not the goal of clarity. The goal of clarity isn't to create conflict. It's to expose conflict. Because whether or not we have that conversation, there's a conflicting idea about how we should be handling the organization.
Yeah.
And so the conversation about clarity now goes, okay, I see what you're thinking. I see what I'm thinking. We need a plan to move forward. Here's how we're going to move forward. This is the clarity we need. Okay. So now the leadership team is all on the same page about that clarity. Well, here's a fun fact. If your leadership team wasn't on the same page, everyone in their department
knew it
by rote was not on the same page.
Right.
Okay. So now we need to take the leadership team and have a conversation with their departments. So here's a great example. We do a survey, 5 questions, super simple, with the leadership team. Everyone's on the same page. Great. Next level, we do those same 5 questions with the middle management. Is everybody on the same page?
Nope.
Probably not, but let's imagine they were. Great. Same 5 questions with everybody in the entire organization. Now, of course, you get outliers. You get the new person who's not quite used to the culture, but how close are we getting to consistency throughout the entire organization? Great. Now we do a customer survey, and which is a waste of time at that point in time. Because if everybody in the organization is consistent and acting consistently, we already know what the end result is for the customer.
Right.
The other way to do it is that in a smaller organization that doesn't have, a C-suite, layers and middle management, then we could go straight to the customers. And we could say, hey, we want to talk to the last 100 people you did business with, and we want to give them a Starbucks gift card in order to fill out this survey. And we want to see what results do we get out of this anonymous survey. So if we get one person say, hey, they're always on time, and one person says I had to follow up 3 times, right? Now that's an opportunity to say, okay, customers aren't getting consistency.
Mhm.
Let's work our way backwards and find out where we're missing the clarity. And some people are clear, but doing their own thing. And that's called rebellion, or a variety of different things. A mutiny, there's all kinds of interesting and exciting words. And it's helpful to see, oh, did you know that, all of your departments are on your same page, but your social media person just wants to post memes because they think they're funny and they have nothing to do with your brand and they're not creating consistency. That's great. We have now the opportunity to create clarity with that person. And again, clarity doesn't create conflict, but clarity sometimes exposes the idea that conflict was already there. So now that person gets to choose, the social media person, and I pick on social media people because it's fun. And they're also usually most aligned with, I can relate to them. And so the conversation then is, do you want to adapt to the values of our organization, or would you like a very generous severance package? Because those are the 2 options. We can't have somebody who wants to do their own thing and represent our brand. So in a practical sense, that's a litmus test.
Yeah.
5 really simple questions that in some cases we go top down, in some cases we go bottom up. 5 very simple questions. We want to find out, is there any conflict in clarity?
And how readily do you find that leadership is willing to make the necessary changes?
It's a really good question. I think by the time that they've gone through this process with me, they've committed to understanding the value of building trust with their customers.
Okay.
Number 1, it leads to more business. Number 2, it leads to more referrals, right? Because I don't refer a restaurant that I don't trust. I don't refer a hairdresser I don't trust. And so if they're committed to building trust, then they're committed by this point in time to walk through that process. Sometimes it's a challenge. I was in a room where I was asked to step out of the room, and when I stepped back into the room, there was 1 fewer team member than when I stepped out. Because that person amicably, let's get this clear, said, if these are the values of the organization, I think I want to do something different with my time. Great. That's way better than I have to fire you because you refuse to line up with our clarity. But that sometimes happens in the sense that, oh, I thought the organization was going in this direction and I wanted to be part of that. But now that we've got clarity, I realize it's going in that direction. And I don't see myself there long term. So it's interesting. And at the end of the day, it's again, consistency doesn't cause confusion, but sometimes consistency exposes confusion. I think that's probably a better way to say it.
Yeah. And boy, you've got me thinking about a couple rooms that I've been in where, um, I was part of a team that walked in. This was pre-COVID, to a lot of nonprofits, and I would say we were partnered with a foundation. The foundation wanted to know that the organizations were healthy and growing, and so as part of their grant package, it was, we're going to send a team of consultants in to help make sure that you are growing in some specified things. And they had outlined, here's the things we want to see. And it was always fascinating to walk in the room, because usually within 30 minutes you knew who was going to be successful as an organization and who was going to continue to struggle. And it came down to clarity, it came down to culture, it came down to a willingness to, hey, do we just want these dollars, or do we want the growth potential that comes from partnering with this organization, because they'd like to see us 2 years from now be in a very different place than we're at.
Yeah.
And I started doing the math recently, and I'm like, okay, 20% bought in and said, we are all in. 10% did the work. And those organizations, as a result, because they worked on their clarity, they worked on their capacity, they worked on their team development, they have 3 and 4x'd their impact. As a result. The ones who didn't, many of them are in the same place they were at 5 years ago. They've continued to run business, continued to work. They're putting out their widgets, but nothing has changed. And it really came down to the principles you're talking about. Was there was, when clarity came and revealed some of those tensions, the ones who could own it and find a way forward are the ones who have been successful long term.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and this is something that when I have my initial consultation with a potential client, I say, hey, just so you know, clarity won't create confusion, but it might expose some.
yeah.
And that might not be a fun conversation in that moment, because as the organization leader, you know in your head what you've been clear about. But your team is going, that's not what we're hearing, right? We hear those words, but we don't hear those meanings. And that's why we can't just throw, 7 core values on the wall of the reception area and expect everybody to make decisions through those. The first step is to discover those core values. And really, there's 3 to 5 values of every organization that really are the core values. The other 2 are either aspirational values, like things we would like to aspire to, but aren't really the core to our brand yet. And the second one might be the pay to play values. So I can't tell you, which I'm sure you've heard also, how many people will say, like, we're the most honest X in town. And it's like, okay, well, unless you can show me, like, honesty is binary. You are or you aren't honest, right? Like, can you show me how you're more honest than the florist down the road? Right. And so it's like, no, that's just a pay to play value. That's just something that if I want to be in business long term, I have to be honest. I have to have integrity. I have to offer great customer service. I have to do what I say I'm going to do. Like, none of those are core values. So really, what is that core value? But I do say that in that initial conversation, clarity won't create confusion, but it might expose some. And we're going to have some interesting conversations. If it exposes some confusion, are you open to that? Like, are you open to somebody on your team saying, well, that's not how I understood it. Can we clarify this? And without you going, I've said it 100 times, fastest plumber in town, fastest plumber in town. How many times do I need to say this? Right? Because it's going to be a
Right.
very short meeting, but I'm still going to send you my full invoice, and you're not going to get the value unless we go through the whole process, you know? And so
Yep.
I have to be clear up front. Your clarity can expose confusion, but it didn't create the confusion. That confusion was always there.
Right.
We now just brought it to the surface so we can talk about it and get clear on it. So we're all creating consistency moving forward.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say roughly my process is that obviously we have a consultation call to see, a discovery call to make sure this organization is a fit for my personality. I'm kind of casual. I'm kind of, here we go, and we're going to follow the rabbit trails, but I do have a structure that we follow, and it's a 3-day process. And so if that organization says, well, we're not setting aside 3 days, it's like, okay, I've got some great resources that could be helpful for a DIY team. But this is what it takes to get clear. And typically we'll do a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So you get off the weekend and people can mess around with their emails on Mondays and people can prep on Fridays for the weekend coming. So we do like a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, but typically Tuesday, Wednesday is we are getting clear with the core leadership team, because until we're all on the same page as a leadership team, we can't pass this down through the organization. And we're articulating exactly what are those things we're going to be clear about. And then on the 3rd day is when we drive it through each of the departments, and we empower everybody in all of the departments to create a list of all of the touch points that a customer has, their welcome mat, how they answer the phone, their email signatures, what are they posting on social media, how do they send out their email newsletters, what does the product packaging look like, what do employee invoice, what kind of paper do we print an invoice on that we send out? Like all these things either build trust with who you want to be as a brand or erode trust. There is no neutral in marketing. So every decision then on day 3 gets driven through all these filters. And then we do some follow-up calls, obviously, to create some clarity and do some check-ins with the different departments. We can do some things like secret shopping. We can hire a secret shopping agency to come and secret shop. Tell us about your experience. Does that reflect your values properly? And then 6 months from now, we run that process again. Again, does that reflect your values properly? At location 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yes, that reflects our values properly. But at location 6, they're not living that out. Great information, great clarity.
Yeah.
It exposed confusion. Let's get that clear.
I love that. So, Adam, for the people who might be interested in that, how would they get connected with you? How would they take the next step for that kind of option?
Yeah, the best way is to connect with me at trustmarketingagency.com and fill out that onboarding form, and we'll be in contact with you and find out if we're a fit. You get to ask whatever questions you'd like about the process. Clearly, we have some questions in our process that we'd like to ask also. And, typically we're looking at a business that has 5 to 10 employees, has some momentum, has a product or service that's already profitable, and they're looking to get clear on how to add gasoline to the fire. That's kind of our fit. And because without any momentum, it's really hard to start, that ball rolling down the hill and be like, okay, let's create an incredible customer experience for a team of 1 or a team of 2 who is like just trying to make the business happen. So a little bit larger team, a little bit of momentum, already profitable, and wants to just kind of throw gasoline on the fire. And then we also would go through that process of saying, we also need to bring in some other contractors. We need to bring in Ryan to talk about how do we articulate this message? Not just how do we live out being the fastest plumber, but how do we communicate that on our website? What words are we using on social? How are we going to frame that radio ad to resonate with that idea? And so, this isn't just an investment in bringing in Adam from Trust Marketing Agency. This is kind of a larger package where we're going to have to litmus test. We're going to have to work with some other contractors who specialize in certain areas to create this consistency across all of your services, your products, your messaging, your communication. And so it's really not for like somebody who's starting out on a shoestring budget, to be honest. But we do have resources that you on trustmarketingagency.com, we do have resources where you can go and walk through the process of figuring out your own core values. Because as a solo entrepreneur or somebody who's starting out, I think that is an important process. Know what it is you want to be known for, what you want your branding to be, how you want to be unique from your competition, and figure out ways to drive that through every customer interaction.
I love that. At so many levels, and see it having played out over really dozens of people in the last few years. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Adam, for your insights. It's always great to connect and to chat with you about all things marketing and life in general. And so I appreciate it. If today's episode gave you clarity, share it with a friend who needs messaging help. And if you're ready to sharpen your brand, to distill your story into something your audience understands and is high proof, contact me about a brand clarity session where we'll dive into your brand, distill your story into the message your audience needs to hear so they take action. As always, thanks for listening. And until next time, keep your ideas bold and your message clear. Straight up.